Claude responded, "When my son-in-law called me on the morning of my wife's funeral and said, 'Frank, I need you to meet me before the service starts, alone, and don't bring your—'" When my son-in-law called me on the morning of my wife's funeral and said, "Frank, I need you to meet me before the service starts, alone, and don't bring your daughter," I almost hung up on him out of pure grief. Then he said the next part. "It's about how your wife really died, and if I'm right, you're in danger too." I stood there in my bathroom in a shirt I hadn't buttoned yet, and I froze. My name is Frank Kowalski. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a foreman at a steel fabrication plant outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I loved my wife, Marlene, from the day I met her at a church picnic when I was 24 until the day she stopped breathing in our bedroom on a Thursday morning in June. This is her story. I'm just the one still here to tell it. The funeral was at Holy Redeemer on a Monday, the kind of gray, humid Pennsylvania morning where the air sticks to your collar before you've even left the house. Marlene had been gone 11 days. The doctors at Allegheny General called it a stroke, sudden and severe. Brought on by a blood pressure spike, they said her heart just couldn't handle at 60 years old. I believed every word of it, because grief doesn't leave room for suspicion. It only leaves room for the next breath and the one after that. My wife had spent 19 years as the office manager for a man named Walter Prescott, who owned Prescott Logistics, a trucking and warehousing company with 3 depots scattered across western Pennsylvania. She ran that office like it was her own family. She used to tell me Walter trusted her with the books more than he trusted his own accountant. And looking back now, I understand exactly how true that was, and exactly what it would end up costing. About 50 people came to say goodbye to her that morning. My daughter, Ashley, sat in the front pew next to her husband, Danny Reyes. Both of them dressed sharp and composed in a way that struck me, even through my own fog, as a little too composed. Danny kept his phone face down on his knee, checking it every few minutes like he was waiting on something more urgent than his mother-in-law's funeral. Ashley didn't cry once. Not during the eulogy. Not during the hymn Marlene used to hum in the kitchen. I remember thinking, in the small part of my brain that wasn't underwater with grief, that something about the two of them felt rehearsed. At 10:40 that morning, right as the priest was closing the service, my phone buzzed against my thigh. I nearly ignored it out of respect for the room. Then I saw the name on the screen, Walter Prescott. I hadn't heard from Walter directly in years, not since Marlene's retirement dinner that never happened because she said she wasn't ready to stop working yet. I stepped out into the vestibule, my heart already starting to climb, and when I answered, Walter's voice came through, tight, clipped, nothing like the calm, unhurried man I'd known for 2 decades. "Frank," he said, "I need you to come to the office. Today. Right now, if you can." "Walter, I'm at my wife's funeral," I said, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry back into the church. "I know exactly where you are," he said, "and I am so sorry to be doing this to you today of all days. But Frank, listen to me. Don't bring Ashley. Don't bring Danny. Not yet. I found something, and until I understand it better, I need you to be careful about who knows you're coming to see me." To understand why those words scraped the floor out from under me, you'd have to understand who Walter Prescott was. In 20 years, I never once heard that man raise his voice or lose his composure, not during a union dispute, not during the recession that nearly sank his company, not even the year a fire took out half his main warehouse. Hearing him rattled like this told me something had gone seriously wrong, and it had gone wrong close to home. I need to explain my family before I go any further, because nothing that happened after makes sense without it. Marlene and I built our whole life on a foreman's paycheck and her office manager's salary. We weren't rich, not even close, but we paid off our house on Larimer Avenue outside Pittsburgh. We kept a modest retirement account we'd been feeding since our 20s, and we helped our daughter whenever she needed it, which over the last 3 years had become a near constant arrangement. Ashley was 34, married to Danny for 7 years, and the two of them ran a small event rental business that had been bleeding money since a bad contract in 2021. What used to be a Sunday phone call turned into weekly visits, and somewhere in the last year, those visits turned into Danny offering, out of nowhere, to help his mother-in-law manage her medications and her banking online, since Marlene's been so busy at work and it's just easier if I handle the boring stuff. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time. Marlene hadn't either. Looking back, that's exactly the problem. In the weeks before she died, my wife wasn't herself, and I didn't pay close enough attention. She was more tired than usual. She said her chest felt tight some mornings, said she felt foggy by lunchtime in a way that scared her because she'd never once been a foggy person in her life. Her doctor adjusted her blood pressure medication twice, trying to chase down what was happening. Danny had started stopping by on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always with the same easy excuse to help her sort her pill organizer for the week so she wouldn't lose track with everything going on at the office. I remember one Thursday afternoon in late May. I came home early from the plant and found Danny alone in our kitchen with Marlene's pill organizer spread open across the counter, and Marlene asleep on the living room couch in the middle of the day, which she never did in her life. Danny smiled at me, easy as anything, said she'd just worn herself out at work, and left 10 minutes later. I didn't think a single thing of it. My wife trusted her son-in-law. I trusted my wife. 4 days before she died, Marlene asked me if I remembered signing some paperwork with her back in February, something about updating our financial power of attorney in case anything happened to either of us as we got older. I told her I had no memory of signing anything like that. She frowned, said Danny had mentioned bringing something like that by the house, and figured she'd simply forgotten. We let it drop. We had no reason not to. The morning she died was a Thursday. I was at the plant, already 2 hours into my shift, and my phone was in my locker on silent, which was against the rules, and the reason I never heard it ring. Marlene called Danny first because I wasn't answering, and by the time somebody finally tracked me down and I got to the house, the paramedics were already loading her into the ambulance. She never made it to the hospital conscious. A stroke, sudden and severe, they told me. Nobody asked a single question past that, and in the wreckage of my grief, neither did I. Standing in that church vestibule with Walter's voice shaking in my ear, every one of those small, strange moments came rushing back at once. The pill organizer on the counter. The paperwork I never signed. The way Danny and Ashley had been circling closer and closer to my wife for the better part of a year, like they were waiting on something to finish. "Walter, just tell me what's going on," I said. "Not on the phone, Frank. Come straight here. Don't stop at the house. And whatever you do, don't mention this call to Danny or Ashley." My hands were shaking by the time I hung up. I went back inside, sat through the final blessing without hearing a single word of it. And when the service ended and people started moving toward their cars for the burial, I told Ashley I had some paperwork from Marlene's life insurance I needed to sort out that afternoon, and that I'd meet everyone back at the house after. Ashley barely glanced up from checking her makeup in a compact mirror. "Sure, Dad. Whatever you need to do." Danny didn't even look my way. He was already walking toward the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, talking low and fast to someone I couldn't see. I stood there for a second, watching my son-in-law hustle away from his mother-in-law's funeral like a man late for a meeting, and that cold feeling in the vestibule settled deeper into my chest. I got into my truck, an old gray Silverado with almost 160,000 miles on it, and I drove toward downtown Pittsburgh with my wife's grave still fresh and unmarked behind me, having no idea the worst part of that day hadn't happened yet. Prescott Logistics ran out of a squat brick office building near the Strip District, the kind of building Marlene used to point at with real pride every time we drove past it. I parked in the small visitor lot at noon, still in my funeral suit, my tie already loosened, my mind cycling through every possible thing Walter could need to show me. I walked through the front entrance past a security guard named Otis who waved me through because he recognized me from the company Christmas party years back, and I headed for the stairs. That's when I saw a car swing hard into the loading zone right outside the glass doors, angled halfway into a space that wasn't a space at all. Danny's silver Charger. I stopped cold. My son-in-law was supposed to be standing at that gravesite right now, shaking hands, thanking neighbors, doing what a son-in-law does on the day his wife's mother goes into the ground. Instead, here he was, downtown, at his mother-in-law's old office, less than 20 minutes after telling me he'd see me back at the house. I stepped behind a support column near the stairwell, my pulse hammering, and I watched through the glass as Danny got out of his car and half-jogged toward the entrance, straightening his jacket, his face pale and tight in a way I had never once seen on him. He didn't look like a grieving son-in-law. He looked like a man running out of time. I stayed frozen behind that column, watching Danny walk straight up to the front desk instead of the stairs, leaning in close to the young receptionist, talking fast, one hand flat on the counter, the posture of a man trying to talk his way somewhere he wasn't welcome. She shook her head. He said something else, more insistent, and she picked up the phone to call upstairs. I used that window to slip past both of them toward the stairwell, my dark suit blending into the lobby traffic just enough that Danny never turned around. And I climbed to the second floor, with my heart still slamming in my ears. Walter was waiting for me right outside the stairwell door, his face pale, his tie loosened like he'd been pacing a hole in the carpet. Frank, thank God, he said, and before I could get a word out, he added, Did you see him downstairs? That's my son-in-law, I said. Walter, what in God's name is going on? Walter's jaw tightened. Because I called your house this morning by mistake before I got your cell, and Ashley picked up. I told her I needed to speak with you about paperwork Marlene left behind. I didn't say what. Apparently, that was enough to send Danny racing down here to get ahead of you. My stomach dropped clean through the floor. Get ahead of me on what? Walter led me down the hall toward his office, and without turning around, he said the words that split my life into a before and an after. Your wife knew something was happening to her, Frank, and she made absolutely sure I'd be the one to tell you, not them. Walter's office looked exactly like I remembered from company picnics years ago. Dark paneling, a view of the Monongahela River in the distance, a desk too large for one man. He shut the door behind us and locked it, then walked past me to a small wall, safe hidden behind a framed photo of the old steel mills. He pulled out a plain manila envelope, Marlene's handwriting scrawled across the front. For Frank only, if anything happens to me. She brought this to me almost a month ago, Walter said, sitting down across from me instead of behind his desk, which told me something about how seriously he meant to treat this. Said she didn't trust keeping it at the house. Said if anything happened to her, I was to hand it to you and only you in person, and to warn you to watch who you told. My hand shook so badly I nearly tore the letter opening it. Inside was a single folded page in Marlene's handwriting and a small thumb drive taped to the back. I read it right there in his office. She'd written that she noticed money disappearing from our joint retirement account. Small amounts first, then bigger ones, moved out over about 5 months. She'd asked Danny about paperwork she had no memory of signing, and he'd waved it off so smoothly that it only made her more uneasy. Enough that she started quietly pulling our bank statements herself, using her old online banking password. She'd found a power of attorney filed with our credit union, dated back in February, carrying both our signatures, except she never signed it, and she was almost certain I hadn't either. She wrote that she'd started feeling strange around the same time Danny began helping organize her pills, and that she didn't want to believe what she was starting to suspect. But she wasn't willing to stay silent about it either. She wrote one more line that stopped my heart cold. I'm not sure yet, Frank. I need one more piece of proof before I destroy our family over a suspicion. If you're reading this, I ran out of time to find it myself. There's more on the drive, Walter said quietly. Frank, I think you should sit down for this. Walter plugged the thumb drive into his laptop and turned the screen toward me. The first folder held screenshots of bank statements. Marlene had circled 4 separate withdrawals from our retirement account between January and May, just over $58,000, all authorized under that power of attorney neither of us had signed. Every dollar had landed in an account belonging to Danny and Ashley. The second folder held photographs, pharmacy receipts laid side by side with her actual prescription bottles, dosages compared in her own careful handwriting. She'd written that the pill count in her weekly organizer never quite matched what the pharmacy said they'd filled, that there were extra pills mixed in, small and unfamiliar. That didn't match anything her doctor had prescribed. The third folder was the one that put ice straight through my chest. A screenshot of a text conversation Marlene had somehow found on our shared family tablet, the one we kept in the kitchen for recipes and photos of the grandkids. A conversation between Ashley and someone saved only as Bobby, dated less than a month before Marlene died. Ashley had written, "She's starting to ask questions about the account. We need to move faster before she says anything to Dad." The reply from Bobby read, "Just keep bumping the dose, a little at a time. Nobody looks twice at a heart thing at her age." I sat there staring at that screen, feeling something come loose in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Walter put his hand on my shoulder and told me my wife had come to him specifically because she was afraid that if something happened to her, whoever was responsible would rush to control the story before I ever learned the truth, and she was determined not to let that happen. "She protected you from beyond the grave, Frank," Walter said quietly. "Now we protect you for real." I asked Walter why he'd warned me not to let Danny or Ashley anywhere near this. He answered plainly, "If Marlene's suspicions held up, and the evidence in front of us said they very likely did, then whoever was behind this was capable of far more than moving money around. And if they realized this drive existed, I could be next, especially with a forged power of attorney already sitting on file that could hand them control of everything I had left. We need proof strong enough for the police, Frank, not just a bad feeling. And we need it before they know we're looking. That afternoon, Walter called an old friend of his, a retired Allegheny County detective named Ray Buccaroni, who did private investigative work since retiring. Ray met us at the office within the hour, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s with tired eyes and a way of listening that made every word feel weighed. He went through the drive twice in near silence, then finally said the thing none of us wanted to hear out loud. "This is enough to open a real investigation," Ray said. "It's not enough yet to guarantee anybody goes to prison. We need the pharmacy records pulled through official channels. We need a handwriting expert on that power of attorney. And honestly, Frank, if you're willing, a camera in your house for a couple weeks would hand us everything else because people like this, they get comfortable and comfortable people talk." I sat in that office, my wife 11 days in the ground, being asked by two men I barely knew to walk back into my own home and act like nothing had changed, while my daughter and her husband believed they'd gotten away with it. It was the hardest thing anyone had ever asked me to do. I said yes without hesitating, because Marlene had trusted me with the truth, and I wasn't about to waste it. Ray installed two small cameras in our house 2 nights later, one tucked into a smoke detector above the kitchen table, one hidden inside an old mantel clock in the living room. While Danny and Ashley believed I was staying with my brother in Erie to grieve in peace, I moved back home the following Monday and told everyone I just needed to be around Marlene's things again for a while. It took 13 days. 13 days of forcing myself to sit across my own dinner table from my daughter and her husband, nodding along while they talked about helping me settle her affairs, listening to Ashley gently bring up the house on Larimer Avenue twice, asking when I thought I might be ready to think about downsizing. Every night I went to bed sick to my stomach, and every morning I got up and did it again. Because Ray told me the second they felt truly safe was the second they'd stop being careful. On the 14th day, it happened. Danny and Ashley came for dinner, and after I went upstairs early, claiming exhaustion, the kitchen camera caught them alone at the table, voices low but clear as a bell. Ashley said, trial, word for word. "The account's fully moved now. Once he agrees to sell the house, we're completely done." "We don't even need the POA anymore," Danny answered. "Just don't get careless like you did with your mom." That pharmacist almost caught the refill pattern. Ashley actually laughed and said, "Nobody double checks an old woman's heart medicine, Danny. Nobody ever does." Ray had that footage locked into an evidence file within the hour. Paired with pharmacy records, his contact pulled showing an unexplained early refill pattern on a medication that's dangerous to the heart in high doses, and a forensic handwriting analysis confirming the power of attorney signatures were forged. We finally had what Ray called an airtight case. Walter looked across his desk at me that night and said quietly, "Now we bring them into the open, Frank, on our terms." We decided to do it at the reading of Marlene's will, already scheduled for the following Thursday at the office of our family lawyer, a sharp, steady woman named Carol Ann Pruitt, who'd handled our paperwork for 15 years. Danny and Ashley had no idea Ray Buccaroni would be sitting quietly in the conference room next door, or that two detectives from the county would be parked outside in an unmarked sedan waiting on his signal. I spent that week playing the part I'd been playing for 2 weeks straight, tired, quiet, cooperative, letting Ashley believe her plan was working exactly the way she'd designed it. She even hugged me the morning of the meeting and told me she was proud of how strong I was being. I stood there and let her arms wrap around me, thinking about that text message on Walter's laptop, feeling nothing but cold, steady patience. We all sat down in Carol Ann's office at 10 that morning. Danny in a charcoal suit, Ashley in black, both of them composed, almost relaxed, clearly expecting a quick formality before they collected what they already believed was theirs. Carol Ann worked through the standard opening of the will and then, right on cue, looked at me and asked if there was anything I wanted to say before continuing. "Actually, yes," I said, and I watched something flicker across Danny's face for the first time, a crack in the composure. "Before we go any further, I think it's time this room saw what your mother left behind." I nodded toward the door, and Walter Prescott walked in carrying his laptop, followed by Ray Buccaroni, whose face Danny clearly recognized from somewhere. Maybe an old traffic stop, maybe just instinct, because the color drained out of my son-in-law immediately. Ashley's voice came out sharp. What is this? Dad, what's going on? I looked at her steady and said, Your mother is exactly what's going on. Walter set the laptop down and played the kitchen footage without a word of introduction. Ashley's own voice filled that small office, clear as day, talking about the account being fully moved, about not needing the power of attorney anymore, and then Danny's voice answering, warning her not to get careless like she had with her mother. The room went dead silent except for that recording, every single word landing like a hammer blow. Ashley's face went white, then red, and she shot up out of her chair so fast it scraped hard against the floor. That's that's not what it sounds like. That's out of context. Sit down, Ray said calmly, showing his credentials for the first time. There are two detectives outside this office right now, and everything you say from this point forward can be used against you. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, and an exhumation and toxicology request already filed with the coroner's office regarding your mother's cause of death. Danny hadn't said a single word yet. He just sat there staring at the table, and I watched something break in my son-in-law's face. Not innocence, because that had been gone a long time already, but the specific look of a man finally understanding there was nowhere left to run. Frank, he said, voice cracking, we never wanted her to actually die. It was just supposed to slow her down, confuse her enough that she wouldn't fight the paperwork. I felt Walter's hand land on my shoulder, steady, grounding, because for 1 second the whole room tilted, and all I could see was Marlene in that hospital bed I never reached in time. But I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Your mother stood over that stove every Sunday for 30 years, making sure everybody at that table had a full plate before she'd even sit down herself, I said, quiet and even. And the two of you sat across from her counting the days until you got the house. The detectives came in 2 minutes later. Ashley cried the entire way out to the car. Danny didn't say another word. It's been almost a year now since that morning in Carol Ann Pruitt's office. Danny pled guilty to financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and forgery, and he's currently serving a 5-year sentence at a state correctional facility outside Somerset. Ashley's case went further. The exhumation and toxicology report confirmed dangerously elevated levels of a heart medication in Marlene's system, far beyond anything any doctor had ever prescribed her, and a jury convicted Ashley of manslaughter alongside the financial charges. She's looking at 14 years. Bobby, it turned out, was Ashley's cousin, a pharmacy technician who'd been quietly diverting the medication for months and is now facing his own separate trial. I still live in the house on Larimer Avenue. Some mornings the quiet used to hurt so bad I could barely stand in the kitchen. Now it mostly just feels honest. The court returned every dollar of that retirement money, though I'll be honest with you, the money was never really the point. Walter Prescott and I have become close friends since all of this, closer than I ever expected two men in our 60s to become. He tells me Marlene used to talk about me at that office more than I ever knew, always proud, always certain I'd do right by her if it ever came down to it. I started a small memorial fund in her name through the cardiac care program at Allegheny General for families who can't afford the kind of follow-up screening that might have caught what was happening to her before it went this far. It's not large yet, but it's growing, and every dollar in it carries her name forward, doing something good, which is exactly the kind of thing she would have wanted. I think about that church vestibule a lot. Walter's voice shaking on the phone, telling me to come see something before it was too late to matter. My wife protected me one last time from beyond the grave, and I intend to spend whatever years I've got left making sure that protection meant something. Claude responded, The love that stays with us isn't measured in money we leave behind, but in the quiet ways we keep watching out for each other, even when we're gone. The love that stays with us isn't measured in money we leave behind, but in the quiet ways we keep watching out for each other, even when we're gone. Trust is precious, but paying attention is an act of love, too. Question gently. Ask twice. Check in on the people you love, not out of suspicion, but because caring closely is sometimes the truest way of saying I see you, and I'll always have your back.